Governor Mark Dayton is the DFL candidate endorsed for governor. He has a long history of public service, and under Governor Rudy Perpich, he served as Commissioner of Economic Development. He was elected Minnesota State Auditor in 1990 and United States Senator in 2000. In 2010, he was elected the 40th governor of the state of Minnesota. Governor Dayton received the AMSD Friend of Public Education Award in 2011 for his commitment to securing investments in education despite the budget deficit. We are very pleased and thankful that Governor Dayton has agreed to join us this morning and to share his vision for education in Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Governor Mark Dayton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. Just like classrooms, right? Well, the front rows. But thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you today, and I appreciate the award. Although I almost get a little worried when I get an award in 2011, and there's a lapse of years afterward. I remember one time when I was running for the U.S. Senate the first time in 1982, I was invited to speak at a church in South Minneapolis, and I wasn't invited back in 21 years later. I said, it was something I said, but anyway, I'm very appreciative of your support and very glad to hopefully support you and to work together. I hope you felt in the last 3.5 years that you had more of an ally than an antagonist in both the governor's office and also in the Department of Education. And I don't know if Brenda Casilius is here, but she is a fabulous, fabulous commissioner in my judgment, and working so hard. And most of the good ideas that we've been able to move forward in the last years are hers, and anything that has gone wrong is especially hers. Just kidding. But I want to thank you for your dedication to public education. This is a very challenging time, and it always gets more challenging, I think, given all the demands and pressures and testing and hopefully a little more money to work with, but it's still always a limitation. So I thank you very much for your hard work and your dedication and for the success that you've achieved. Ninth straight year Minnesota leads the states in the ACT results. I mean, that's just one measure of the way in which you and your staffs and your teachers provide really outstanding education to so many of our young people, for which you get very little credit and very little recognition and certainly very little appreciation. So I thank you. I thank you very much. I think we made a lot of progress in this period of time. That was my goal when I took office. I said a better Minnesota. I also said that I would increase state funding for K-12 public education every year I was governor. No excuses, no exceptions. And I'm proud to have kept that promise as well. Even though now, and some people say, oh, well, you've raised the per pupil aid and all that, which we have. But according to one national evaluation using national government statistics, Minnesota now ranks 24th among the states in per pupil assistance. So the state of Minnesota is right in the middle. We've come up from where we were before, but we're not where we should be given the dedication that our citizens have to education and to excellence and the challenges that all of you face. So we made progress, but there's still a lot more to be done. We also paid off the school debt, something I think is very important. It's part of the overall improvement in fiscal management that we've carried out with the help of the legislature over the last 3.5 years. $2.8 billion of school debt, $6 billion projected deficit when I arrived, and 2 years ago, $627 million, and now we're looking at a projected surplus. And we've eliminated all I believe we've eliminated all. They keep popping up. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. The various gimmicks and raids of this fund and that fund. And first it was the regional airport fund, and then it was the firefighters training fund, and then it was the minerals fund, and now it's the solid waste trust fund that we owe over $100 million that was taken out of the budget, taken out of the dedicated fund for the purpose of balancing the budget some distant year gone by. But I think we've straightened out most, if not all of that out, and so and we added to the budgeted reserve. So we're in a sound fiscal condition to face the future, and with the projected surplus to continue to do more in a prudent way, but in a way that's going to pay off for Minnesota, and that's number one is education. As you know, we've had a number of successes in the legislature. I thank the legislators of both parties. I'm obviously a partisan, and since my political aide is here, not my office aide, I assume this is, at least in this context, somewhat political. So I want to give the DFL legislature credit for the increases of the last 2 years and for the initiatives that they've undertaken. But I also want to credit the Republican legislators. In the first 2 years, when we were facing those dire budget straits, we increased funding for K-12 education. So I think it shows that it is a bipartisan commitment on the part of Minnesotans, part of the parents that you serve, and a part of the ethic of the state, and it's the reason we've been as successful as we have. You know, it's trite but true. The number one reason that we have a prosperous state, a growing state, and better than most, is because of education. When I ask businesses, why are you locating, why are you expanding in Minnesota? Always the number one reason is well-educated, hardworking citizenry, productive workers. We have entrepreneurs, innovators, and others who have come up through the Minnesota public school system, and you deserve, and your counterparts, a lot of credit for those achievements. We started really, and then expanded early childhood education, at least the state scholarships to support that activity. That seems to have gotten off well. I was in Rochester a few weeks ago and visited a early childhood program there, and sat down with a group of 4-year-olds, and one little girl sort of looking me up and down. She said, "Are you the bus driver?" I said, "Yeah, well, in a way, yeah, kind of, you know." Check the tires, you know, and change the oil and whatever's called for. But that's very important. All-day kindergarten, I'm very excited about that. That was something I proposed starting in 2009, and didn't get very far the first couple of years, but the legislature picked it up in 2013, and as you know, it started just a couple of weeks ago. Many of you are doing it already, to your credit, paying for it yourselves or paying for part of it. So I hope that with the state funding that you'll be able to use that money, I'm sure you will, for other worthwhile purposes. But whole areas of the state where all-day kindergarten was not an option for parents and for young children are now embraced it. The response has been very, very positive, and I think it's going to make a difference. I think the combination of early childhood and all-day kindergarten, and now a couple of states have already initiated 4-year-old all-day, optional all-day or half-day education programs, and that's something we should take a look at for the future. We have issues of fiscal capacity, we have issues of physical building capacities, but I think the evidence is in that the earlier we start working with children, earlier we start working with their parents, the better opportunities we give those, especially the ones who have come from disadvantaged situations, to a chance to be as successful as their counterparts. The Read by End of Third Grade initiative is a legacy of State Senator Jen Olson, and I was really proud to work with her on that in 2012. You know, one of the things that I have asked Commissioner Cassellius is this being implemented all over the state? And she said, well, over half of the districts, in her judgment, now have some kind of serious Read by the End of Third Grade initiative. But there are a couple of, I'm told, better than the other strategies for achieving that. And I would like her regional centers of excellence, which she pioneered, and which the test results yesterday evidence once again is 2 days ago, was productive for the working with schools and school districts that are still challenged to adopt some of the more innovative and proven effective methods. So the ability to, to get every school by doing whatever it is that's most effective in reading by the end of third grade and other initiatives as well is really one of my key strategies for the next 4 years if I have that opportunity. I think we've initiated a lot, put a lot in place. There are more good ideas. I welcome hearing from you about them, but I'd like to see us do what we're doing now and do it even better and develop a statewide network for sharing of ideas and best practices and see what we can do to give every child that same opportunity. It's a lot. We've asked a lot of you. You've responded and responded very well. So my goal is to work with you to continue to improve upon what we've started. I'm open to ideas and suggestions for something new. I think I've given you before my home phone number, so you can contact me directly with ideas, suggestions at 651-201-3468. Take a pen out now. Come on, open your books. 651-201-3468. I live alone with 2 German Shepherds. They don't know how to answer the phone, so you either get security, you get me. And I will really welcome, especially after November 4th, if I'm going to be around. I keep saying a year from now I'll either be in Bowabic or Bolivia. But if it happens to be Bowabic, then I really would look forward to an opportunity to roll up the sleeves and work with all of you again and take the best of your ideas and what we need to do to continue to improve the quality of public education in Minnesota. So with that, I'll be glad to respond to questions. Is there time for that? Is that the format? Yeah.
We'll use the mic this time to make sure everyone can hear. The governor can spend another 15 or 20 minutes with us.
Good morning. I'm Betsy Anderson from the Hopkins School Board. Governor Dayton, you're a father and a grandfather now. What do you see as the top challenge over the next 20 years for kids in this state?
Well, if my grandson and his contemporaries, the reason we need a successful public education system and strategy that affects and benefits all kids is if he and his peers grow up and are engaged in our society and in the workplace and the like, and if 95+% of them are well-educated and productive citizens, successful, have jobs, starting businesses, paying taxes, and the other 5% are struggling, but we're helping them improve, then they're going to make it. You know, we as a society will make it. The demographics are difficult with my generation retiring en masse and the costs of that, but they're manageable if we have a growing economy and a healthy society. If only 85% of my grandson and his peers are gainfully employed and 10% are unemployed, 5% are in prison, it's going to be a wrenching of the social fabric that'll be extremely difficult for all of them to contend with. So I say to people who say, well, you know, my child is already through kindergarten or my child is already graduated, you know, why should I want to support, all-day kindergarten and some of these other measures? And I say just for that reason, because your children and grandchildren are interdependent with everyone else. And so I think that's the most important challenge we have. Secondly, and this gets into something that I would like to develop further in the next legislative session and beyond. We need to align our education programs better with the jobs of the future rather than the past. And it really needs to go back to, I think, junior high school. You know, we rank near the bottom of the states in guidance counselors per student. And we need people who are not only trained in emotional and social guidance, but also career guidance. Microsoft has 2,600 vacancies, I'm told, for people with computer science degrees or experience. Starting salary is $105,000 a year, but the benefit package is $200,000 a year. Half my staff are now filling out job applications. But you have to have an aptitude and interest for computers. But I'd like to believe if young people understood at an earlier age that that's a real opportunity. Complete your education, get some advanced education or training, and you can walk into the job market and be earning a really lucrative salary and have all the opportunities. I'd like to open up those doors and open up those ideas in young people's minds that that could be for me too. I was up in the Iron Range. They're looking for welders. They're looking for engineers, mechanics. And again, we need not only to have those curricula available, but we need to equip our minuscule campuses, especially, but high schools as well as the universities with the buildings, equipment, technology, so that they can offer state-of-the-art training. So somebody can step out of one of those schools, one of those programs, and be employable almost immediately. And we have situations where we have a community college or vocational technical college literally right across the street from a major industrial employer, and they're not linked up in terms of the training available at the college and what that employer is looking for in terms of skills to hire, ideally right off the street. So I'd say those are two of the key areas. I think the states that get aligned best, since education is going to be even more important to people's success and really even more of a differentiator between relatively well-paying and certainly high intelligence and high opportunity jobs and lower paying and dead-end jobs. I think one of the big reasons that states will be successful is if they get that alignment in place and get it working. Thank you.
Governor, thank you for your hard work for us. I'm Karen Orcutt, and I'm from Orono Schools.
Okay. I was kindergarten, first and second grade.
We know that, and we're very, very proud of it.
The my elementary school is now an historical museum, and you're getting old when your elementary school is becoming an historical museum.
We're very proud of that.
Well, I don't know if you should be.
I am a longtime supporter and leader in special education and believe in what we're doing there, but we must find ways to continue to look for driving down the cross-subsidization and the erosion of our general revenue from special education. Do you have any thoughts? We've looked at this for years.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I thank you for championing that. When I was in the U.S. Senate, I offered 7 amendments in 6 years to fully fund the federal commitment to special education, which when it was passed in the late 70s was 40% of the cost. And when I arrived, it was less than half of that, and I think it's even worse than that today. It was total would cost $20 billion a year back 10 years ago to implement it, which was the cost of 2/3 of a month in Iraq. So I said it wasn't that we don't have the money, it's that we don't have the right priorities. And as you well know, the failure of the federal government to meet that responsibility means that all the school districts and the state have to pick up a larger share of what should be a shared responsibility. I proposed the last time I believe it was about 2.5 times the increase for special ed that was passed. I'd have to say it's one of those areas where how does it benefit my district becomes unfortunately more of a priority than I think it should, given the nature of the need and the kids involved. But it's something that I'm going to go back, if I'm back next year, and push even harder and insist that the state continue to pick that up. And I'm not optimistic the federal government can be persuaded to do anything constructive at this point. But if that happens, I'll push for that as well. But thank you for what you're doing there. Thank you for all those kids whose lives you're saving, transforming, and in terms of the other thing I would add to that is the paperwork. And I've been banging my head against that wall. Testing and paperwork, the two things that make me grind my teeth, among others. But I hear again and again from special ed teachers that the amount of paperwork they're required, the amount of time it takes them away from the students, is just really counterproductive. And we made a couple of attempts to reduce that, and you've got all these federal regulations in state and sometimes school district requirements as well. But we've got to free up teachers to be teachers, especially in special education. And I intend to continue to work on that too. And any other ideas, I hope you'll give me that phone number a call. Thank you.
Good morning, Governor. Steve Kerr with the Cannabon School District. I certainly want to thank you for kind of help the conversation going forward on early education. It's certainly important. I think what's a struggle for us is we got a statewide delivery system for schools serving children who need some extra boost to be ready for kindergarten. And in scholarships, while they're popular, and it's a popular political kind of a piece right now, has been kind of a splotchy delivery across the state. And yet in many of our districts, we're doing a number of programs, and I can cite some of our data where we're taking at-risk children, special needs, high poverty, and after a year with us, they're ready for kindergarten. 90% of them are prepared and kindergarten ready after we've done pre and post assessment. But we seem to be fighting upstream, if you will, at the legislature to get support for those kinds of programs. In fact, until we got a couple $1 million last year, it had been since 1991 since we had received funding for some of those school-based programs. So would appreciate your support in any of those areas going forward.
You know, the impetus starting in 2011 for state funding for early childhood came from really first the business leadership, to their credit, business partnership made this one of their priorities, and had the former State Senator Dwayne Benson, for whom I have a lot of respect, involved in setting up some pilot programs. And then some of the other early childhood advocacy groups, Mini Minds and some of the others, were pretty much all focused on the child care, the non-public school segment of that early childhood education. And so the first funding for the legislation that was enacted really gave those programs a priority. And I thought, however, that we're now the state pool, which I believe is about $44 million, I thought that half of that was going to those early childhood scholarship programs, and the other was going to public education, probably scholarships, but still programs through the public Minnesota Department of Education. So don't hold me to those numbers. I may be incorrect, and if not, we'll look at it the next session. But somehow, the question is, what's best for the child? And last time we had, maybe it was 13, one of the sessions we had pretty ferocious infighting between those two camps, people who want to provide these services outside of the public school system and those who want to provide it within. And one case it might be one thing, one case it might be another, but the real question ought to be what benefits the children the most. And I hope that spirit, in the sense that everybody has the same objective and maybe a different strategy, will prevail in the future.
Hi, Governor Dayton. Rebecca Gagnon. I'm over here. Minneapolis Public Schools. So are you looking at the recent teacher contract negotiations and things that educators have brought forward that are important to them to inform your agenda, like home visits, smaller class sizes, and increased support staff in schools, like our counselors and things like that?
Absolutely. My first job out of college, I was taught ninth grade general science in a public school in the Lower East Side of New York City, and I've always said it's the toughest job I ever had up until this one. And they taught me a lot more than I taught them, but I had 32 kids crowded into a classroom. I mean, it was extremely difficult. So class size is something I've always been very attuned to. And I remember, I don't know, a decade, maybe 15 years ago, in both Minneapolis and St. Paul schools, there was a referenda to bring class sizes down to 17, I believe it was 17 children per classroom, and that was implemented. And then it's sort of, the pressures of everything else, especially on the property tax with the cutback in state funding, meant that I think that's largely disappeared, what I hear from teachers in terms of class size, correct. So yes, I mean, this class size, the counseling and supportive services, there's an issue now of suspensions and discipline for kids. And my own, I'm not an expert, but my own lay judgment, and based on my experience in New York, is that suspending a child or a young adult and bringing them right back is probably not going to solve the problem. What it really signals is a need for help and a need for strong intervention and a need to get somebody involved, with that family, with that child, with the parents, and really, make the corrections. And if we're doing that in the earliest grades, I think the chances of success are greatest, and the impact on the school is the best as well. One of my sons, we got called into the principal's office when he was in elementary school, and he was fuming because he didn't think the teacher was a good teacher, and the teacher didn't think he was a particularly good student. He and about half a dozen of his friends. And this principal, wise man, a lot of experience, said, Eric, I really think that you and your friends have a lot to do with how good this teacher is. And I could relate to that because I remember teaching, ninth grade. If I had, half a dozen kids who were roaming around the room, I had a real challenge in my hand. If I had, more than that, 8 or 10, and if I had a couple kids fighting in the corner and whatever else was going on, it was very, very hard and very unfair to the children who were there, who wanted to learn and have that opportunity. So I think that we're going to need to recognize that, people again think we're spending so much on public education and we're spending more, but we're still not providing the resources necessary to commensurate with the needs that are there. And if we don't do that, and if we don't find intervention strategies that are going to be proven successful, then we pay the consequence of that further down the road with further disruption and dysfunction. So something to keep working towards, something to keep, for all of you to keep telling parents and taxpayers, try to help them understand what the scope of this need is. I find so many people in St. Paul at the Capitol, they don't have a clue what it's like to be in an inner city or even now a suburban or exurban high school. Just really don't have any real understanding of the challenges you face, and all the kids from all backgrounds and all the different languages, and kids with all different capabilities and life experiences and everything else. Again, it's far from perfect, but all of you and your systems do an amazing job, and you're dedicated to doing as well as you can, and you deserve, as I say, respect and gratitude from everyone else, and you deserve the support. But you need to tell people, please, what's missing, and if people want better performance, better results, which they certainly do, and which we all want to provide, then what are the ingredients that are still missing to achieve that?
The governor has graciously said that he would stay with us till 8:30, so we have time for about one more question.
I'd stay with you longer, but I think you have another agenda, so.
George Kimball, White Bear Lake School Board. You were a proponent of the legislation that sort of guaranteed no student would be singled out and turned away from a hot lunch. So the question is sort of your philosophy on the role of government and schools when it comes to that sort of thing. We have schools like Wayzata opting out of federal program, raised nutritional requirements in lunches and so on. So the possibility of breakfasts and things. So just wondering your thoughts on these things.
Well, I think government's role is to set a standard, and if a nutritious hot lunch is part of what we know is necessary, a nutritious breakfast is also necessary for children and students to have opportunities to be successful, then the government ought to set those standards. We have a tradition of local control of our schools, and that's almost sacred in Minnesota, certainly widely supported. So school districts, school boards, superintendents make the ultimate decisions what they're willing to join in with and where they're going to take a stand and insist on doing something differently. And that's something that hopefully can be worked out in a constructive and a cooperative way. But when it comes to saying to certain schools or principals or whomever, it's not okay to embarrass a child in front of his or her peers and deny them. Literally, I've told in some cases take the tray away from them because they don't have they're not on the lunch plan. I mean, to me, that defies, first of all, defies common sense. And I think, fortunately, it's very, very unusual in Minnesota. But it is cause then for government to say, that's not our standard. I had kids who came to school with no breakfast and 25 cents in their pockets for French fries for lunch, and then people wonder why they were having trouble concentrating in class. Okay, well, having said that, there's nutritious breakfast in the back there, and thank you very much. I hope we have a chance to work with you. Thank you.